Jaipil lecture series of this academic year. We're very honored and delighted to have Professor Gi-Wook Shin with us today. We have many RSVPs. I mean, the topic that we'll be presenting today, I'm sure it appeals to many of our students, especially here in Washington, about well, it's not shift, but more recently from anti-Japanese to anti-Chinese sentiment and its implications for the U.S. ROK relations. So, and thanks to those of you who are in person here in this room today, as well as also those of you joining us online virtually. So I'll try to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session. So those of you joining us virtually, please feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A box. All right, so before I ask Professor Shin to give his lecture, I'll like to have the pleasure to introduce him. Professor Gi-Wook Shin is a William J. Perry Professor of Contemporary Korea in Sociology and a Senior Fellow of the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies at Stanford University. He has been serving as the Director of the Shorenstein Asia-Pacific Research Center since 2005, as well as the Founding Director of the Korea Program since 2001. His research concentrates on social movements, nationalism, development, and international relations with focus on Korea and broader Asia. He is the author and editor of over 20 books and numerous articles. Very impressive. And of course, I can't list all of them, but just to name a few. South Korea's democracy in crisis, the threats of illiberalism, populism, and polarization. The North Korean Conundrum, balancing human rights and nuclear security, and shifting gears in innovation policy from Asia, Divergent Memories, Opinion Leaders, and the Asia-Pacific War, One Alliance, Two Lenses, U.S. Korea Relations in a New Era, Cross Currents, Regionalism and Nationalism in Northeast Asia, and Ethnic Nationalism in Korea. Wow, what a breadth of scholarship. Without further ado, I'd like to have Professor Shin give his lecture. Please join me in welcoming him.
Yeah, thank you for a very kind introduction. Actually, this is my first travel since pandemic began. I've been coming to DC quite a bit before pandemic, but during pandemic I decided to stay home. So I'm enjoying nice little break. And I heard a lot of great things about the program here at GW, and really applause Professor Kim's efforts to create a very viable career program in DC. So I'm really happy and honored to address my lecture today, and I'm sure some people are joining virtually from California, so I just say hi to all of you. Okay, so I'm going to look at basically, why Korea became so anti-China in recent years. So it's not that anti-Japanese sentiments are changing to anti-China sentiment. I'm still strong anti-Japanese sentiments in Korea, but I think it's a recent phenomena that Koreans became quite against China, and what's the implication for the United States. So I'm going to address that topic, and then feel free to interrupt my lecture if you have any question. I'm happy to address. Okay, so let me go over some recent incidents that have influenced Korean public sentiment. Okay, some of them probably real, some of them is misleading, but nonetheless, they are the ones who affected public sentiments or opinion in South Korea. Okay, March of last year, there was a historical drama called Joseon Exorcist. Actually, I happened to be watching this one on SBS. One thing I began to start was to watch K-drama during pandemic. You're stuck at home, nothing else to do. So, and I think it was aired on SBS. And I think after 2 or 3 episodes, they stopped airing this drama because there's a big protest from the Korean public that this was distorting Korean history. So I guess some of you were watching that drama as well. And then around at the same time, there was a project in Gangwon province to build kind of a Chinatown to attract Chinese tourists. But that project also stopped because Korea is saying, why we are building Chinatown in our own territory. Okay, so, and also there's some controversy over Chinese claim to Korean culture or heritage, like hanbok or even kimchi. And then this controversy over hanbok became really contentious during Winter Olympics. So earlier this year, right? Yeah, in Beijing. And then in early days of pandemic, Korean government sent some masks to China. And soon after, Korea was facing mask shortage as well. And then that also actually provoked some negative reaction against China. And then controversy about hanbok and speed skating decision and so on. So we have done a survey right before the Olympics, and about 42% of respondents said that Korea should engage in diplomatic boycotts of the Olympics. And you know that U.S. Did diplomatic boycotts of Beijing Olympics. And maybe later we can discuss whether is any good grounds to be angry about having ethnic Koreans wearing hanbok in the opening ceremony of Beijing Olympics. Actually, I was teaching a course on Asia at the time last year, and then we had some discussions, and there were some Korean and Chinese American it's quite different views. So I'm happy to have some conversation after my lecture whether is there any good ground to be angry about, ethnic Koreans wearing hanbok in the opening ceremony in Beijing Olympics. And then more lately, I showed that National Museum of China, excluded information about Goguryeo and Pare kingdoms. And certainly, especially Goguryeo is a key part of Korean history, right? Three kingdom period, Goguryeo, Shilla, Baekje. You can see that it's missing there. So I think Koreans quite angry about that. So once again, over last year or so, there are a lot of episodes. Some of them may look quite silly, right? Why you are arguing over hanbok, for example, right? Then why you are protesting, against building Chinatown in Gangwon province, it's fairly remote, fairly underdeveloped part of Korea. But nonetheless, they all combine to provoke very negative sentiments against China among Koreans in the South. Okay, so if you look at long-term change in public sentiment, you can see that here. You can see that around 2017, Korean view of China became really negative. From about 60% they favored a positive feeling about China, and they dropped to like 37 by 2018. Do you know what happened at the time? So around 2017.
Sanctions.
Sanctions. What sanctions?
Economic sanctions against South Korea over the bad issue.
Right. So I think that was really turning point. You may remember that U.S. deployed THAAD, right? High-altitude missile, and then China responded with economic retaliation. I think that was an important turning point. So before that, I think overall, South Korean view of China was largely positive, but then all of a sudden became very negative. And I think by 21, I think there are more negative view of China than negative view of Japan. So yeah, your question.
Yeah, that same period, all the other countries except North Korea, the opinion goes down too, right?
Well, not this one. Yeah, North Korea is that's during Moon Jae-in.
Okay, but right, that's anxious, but also if that is American, but American sentiment towards America also went down too at the same time.
I think that's probably to do with the Trump in terms of United States. And then North Korea, during Moon Jae-in government, they were engaging North Korea very aggressively. So at least for a while, it created a positive sentiment. But I think regarding United States, I think more to do with the Trump administration. Okay, so then once again, Korean view of Japan still very negative, but then even more so against China. I mean, that's something new, okay? And then we are trying to explain what happened and then what's implication for the future. Okay, before that, if you look at public opinion of China in many other parts of the world, Korea was not an exception. Okay, there are fairly widespread anti-China sentiments in many parts of the world. Okay, in Japan, Australia, U.S., Canada, Germany, and so on. So I think other than some countries in Africa or some Asian country, there's fairly large amounts of anti-China sentiments around the world. And let me take a look at a little more specifically about 4 countries. In Korea, also in Australia, and in Japan and the United States. Okay, so you can see that for Koreans in 2002, about 2/3 of Koreans had more positive view of China, but then by 2022, only 19%, right? It's a really big drop. And then if you look at Australia, the turning point was about, I think, 17, 18. Do you know what happened in Australia? So for Korea, it's a third deployment and economic retaliation. In Australia, so there was an allegation that Chinese gave some donation or contribution to Australian politicians that provoked some controversy. And also there was one Australian professor who was quite critical of China. Then he was really criticized by the Chinese students in Australia. So that also provoked some controversy. So Japan is really interesting, right? So the turning point was like early 2000. You know what happened at the time? So here, like in Japan, it dropped from early 2000. So actually, Japan is a little different pattern than Korea or Australia, right? I think here more to do with territorial disputes over Senkaku, Dial Islands. And then in case of United States, basically trade tensions under Trump administration. So I think here you can see Korea from a comparative perspective. So that Korea is not an exception, but then somewhat different than other countries. Okay, so let's think about what are factors that may have contributed to the rise of anti-China sentiments. One is air pollution. So if you go to Korea industry, I mean, you're gonna see a lot of fine dust and yellow dust. And then a lot of Koreans blame Chinese, right? I think partly China is responsible, but it's not entirely China's fault. But still, Korean public tends to blame China. And then COVID-19 also made a contribution. And if you look at the Pew survey of 2020, Korea and Japan had the most negative assessments of China's handling of COVID-19. In early days, Koreans called COVID-19 Wuhan virus, just like Trump right here. And about almost 80% of respondents in both countries said that China had done a bad job with the outbreak of the pandemic. Okay, and I mentioned about Moon Jae-in government sending masks to China in early days. So there's something about COVID-19. And also economic issues, once again, retaliation against deployments of THAADs. And also there has been some issue regarding fishing zone in the West Sea or Yellow Sea. And also U.S.-China trade conflict contributed to the rise of anti-China sentiments in Korea as well. I think more interesting one is that I think Koreans' unhappiness with Chinese political system, especially over political and human rights issue. I'd like to highlight this part and come back to this issue. I think Koreans are increasingly concerned about political or human rights issues in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and also Uyghurs. And now I think these are covered quite well in the Korean media, especially including social media. And Koreans have very unfavorable views of Xi Jinping. Once again, according to Pew survey of 12 countries, Korea had the second most dramatic increase in negative opinion over the past 8 years about Xi Jinping, about 37% in 2017 to 87% by 2022. Okay, so I think on the right side, there's high correlation between negative assessments of China and the sense that China doesn't respect personal freedom of each people. So this is more cross-national study by Pew, and you can see there's a high correlation. And I think that applies to especially for young people, which I comment shortly. And then historical and cultural issues. I mentioned a lot of episodes in the beginning about history project and over kimchi, hanbok, and so on. Okay, here you can see major regions for Koreans' negative impression of China over time. Okay, so here you can see from 2019 to 2021. So I think there are 2 or 3 points that stand out. One is still Chinese retaliation against deployment is more central. But then from 2019 to 2021, the importance has declined, right, from about 82% in 2019 to about 65% by 2021. So still important, but decline in its importance. But then this one, China's lack of respect for Korea, okay, that importance has increased over time. Okay, it's about 34% in 2019, and almost like 44% by 2021. I think this is very important. This is something that if I have any advice for Chinese, I'm not sure anyone is listening. I think they should do better public diplomacy against towards Korea, because a lot of Korean people believe that Korea needs better respect, from China. So lately, new president Yoon Suk-Yeol mentioned that Sino-Korea relationship has to be based on mutual respect. I think that's the right point, reflecting public opinion. So military threats are fairly small, but I think if you do survey now, probably my guess may be higher, given recent tension over Taiwan. Okay, then who's the most vocal, right? Now, one thing interesting is younger people. Okay, those in 20s and 30s, they are most critical, against China. So here, only 60% among 20s, they have more positive feeling about China, and then in the 30s, only 22%. So I think this raises a important question. Why younger people are more negative against China? So maybe there can be a number of interpretation, and I will welcome your views as well. And my view is that those people in 20s and 30s, unlike my generation, I grew up much earlier than that. So they grew up with a liberal democratic society. Okay, when I was growing up, it's very authoritarian and still trying to develop economy. It's kind of funny because Park Chung-hee got killed in 1979. That's when I entered my college. And then basically for my life until then, there's only one president. So it sounds very funny that we have someone else to be president, right? So we grew up, in the era, but for young people in Korea these days, they are very different. And I don't think they are necessarily nationalistic. If they are, then quite different way than older generation. So compared to 586, activists, they grew up with anti-American sentiments. I mean, they are the one who went to college in 1980s and engaged in very strong anti-American sentiments. They were more sympathetic to China because I entered college in 1979, and then soon after we were engaged in a lot of protest movement on campus. I know for a fact, many of my friends and colleagues, they were reading, books of Mao, Maoism, and then, for them, Mao is a more nationalistic hero compared to American imperialism, right? So that's where, when those 586 activists grew up, I think now younger people are much different, and they are much more proud of their society. And for them, China is simply authoritarian communist society who doesn't appreciate or value human rights and democracy, and so on. And also, I guess, impact of social media probably a good factor because younger people use more of social media. So I mean, I gave you some examples here, right? It's not Han food, but it's the hanbok, right? And then also in the bottom they are saying that I hope that the Chinese don't come to Korea. I'm not going to experience Chinese culture and so on. So I think a lot of things are spreading through social media. So my sense maybe the younger people are more influenced by those stories from social media. So that might explain also is partially why younger people are more negative against China than their seniors. And also here, if the U.S. and China continue their rivalry, which country should South Korea strengthen ties with? And here you can see that regardless of age or ideology, United States. this is a very important change because until lately, there was a very strong paradigm in Korea, which is 한미경쟁, so basically saying U.S. for security, economy for China. But the paradigm now doesn't work anymore. So I think that's a good news for United States, especially given that there were very strong anti-American movement in 1980s and also early 2000. But now the public opinion significantly shifted in favor of the United States. So I'll come back to this question later towards the end, whether U.S. is really appreciating or capitalizing on this public shift in South Korea or not. And then by looking at comparatively, actually Korea is the only country where younger people are more anti-China than older generation. If you look at other countries, the older people tend to be more negative against China. So in that sense, once again, Korea stands out. Okay, now let's compare to anti-American and anti-Japanese sentiments. I've been writing book and articles on anti-American and anti-Japanese sentiments and movement in Korea. 10 years ago, I couldn't even imagine that I was speaking about anti-China today here in Washington, D.C. So I think if you look at anti-American sentiments or movements in South Korea, they had a lot to do with U.S. policy. Okay, so like in old days, American supports of Korean dictatorship, but not really against Americans or American culture. I mean, still, they love to come to American colleges like George Washington or Stanford, right? So, there was talk that when they saying Yankees go home, right? Then please take me with you. A kind of joke. So in other words, they were very critical of American policy, but still they liked American culture, American people. They still respected American institutions, democracy and university, and so on, except certain period of our recent history. And regarding anti-Japanese, it's a lot to do with historical memory of colonialism and war, actually. I mean, still it's going on. I mean, that's why still they're largely negative against Japan. So I'm not saying that Korea is becoming much more positive towards Japan. That's not the point. But nonetheless, Koreans like Japanese culture, food and fashion. I think when it comes to China, so in my view, it's quite different. It's more critique of Chinese cultural imperialism and liberalism. And I don't hear many Koreans saying we should learn from China or respect Chinese institutions. I mean, for a while, China has been good economic opportunity for Korean companies, right? But still, I don't think many Koreans saying that we should, adopt Chinese political system, right? Or Chinese college system and so on. So, I mean, overall, I've written a book on ethnic nationalism in Korea. I think overall, Koreans are very nationalistic, for good or bad, right? And there has been strong anti-foreign sentiments. But if you look at anti-American, anti-Japanese, and anti-Chinese now, they are quite different in basic nature. Okay, so what's the implication for the U.S. ROK alliance? After all, I'm here in DC, so I think one question is, did anti-China sentiments play a role in the election? I think conventional wisdom is that foreign affairs does not affect domestic politics. And right before the election, we had a survey, and then about 70% of respondents said that ROK-China relations would be an important consideration in choosing the candidate. So actually, in the spring of last year, I had one interview with CNBC, and then they were asking me whether this anti-China sentiment should affect the election. Then I said I'm skeptical. I was wrong because a lot of Korean people saying it can be better. And after the election, we did survey again, and you can see that actually those who supported Yoon Suk-Yeol, they were more anti-Chinese compared to those who supported Lee Jae-myung. So certainly there was a difference. And then what can we expect from the new government? As you know, the Yoon Suk-Yeol government really wanted to strengthen the alliance, and they're really support United States in our fight against autocracy, like Russia, China, and so on. And then only 42% of Korea still agree with Army Gyeongjang as a nation, U.S. for security, China for economic paradigm, but majority disagree. And of those who disagree, about 80% said that Korea should move closer to the United States. And then here on the right side, you can see that those who support strengthening ties with the United States, the proportion has increased over time. So I think that's good news for Washington. I'm sure those in Washington, they were quite relieved when Yoon became our new president. And now more lately, a lot of disappointment among Koreans. Some Koreans even say they feel betrayed. Okay, I don't know how much you have followed the news, but there's new law, right? Inflation Reduction Act, right? And then that excludes giving rebates, right, to electric cars produced outside the United States, so that Korean car, like Hyundai, basically, the electric car. I mean, they were export a lot of electric car, and then they are not eligible to get this rebate because of this IRA. And then you may remember that Biden came to Korea in the early years of the government, and many Korean companies like Hyundai, Motor, and Samsung, SK, they made huge investment, right? To invest a lot of amounts in the United States. But then also, Korea has an FTA with the United States, but still, those cars made in Korea are excluded from getting benefits from IRA. So that's why I think now some Korean people, they're not only disappointed, some of them saying they are quite betrayed. So here I'm going to give like two opinion columns, one by progressive, the other conservative. One is Park Hyun. Both Park Hyun and Lee Mi-suk, they were Washington correspondents for their newspaper. So Hangyeol represents liberal side, and Munhwa-ilbo has been most pro-alliance actually over the years. And Park Hyun saying that Yoon Suk-Yeol's diplomacy is fooled by the United States. Of course, your main target is the government, okay? But nonetheless, basically he's saying that Koreans are fooled by the United States. And conservative, they are worried that U.S. IRA can evoke trust in the alliance and may provoke anti-American sentiments again in South Korea. So certainly their emphasis is different. Liberals more blaming the government, and then conservative are concerned about the return of anti-American sentiments. But nonetheless, they are quite disappointed by the recent act by the United States. So that they are sending warning of U.S. neglect of Korean interests. Okay, so I think in my view, this is a very important moment, and it's a very important issue because now South Korea is really trying to support United States. And U.S. needs South Korea in its fight against autocracy and Russia, China, and so on. But then, if U.S. continue this way, then I think it can influence South Korean public sentiment. So I think now, in a sense, some Koreans are confused because they don't like Japanese, they don't like Chinese, right? They like American, right? But they feel betrayed and so on. So, certainly there are politics here in Washington, and I understand, why Biden administrations, pushed for IRA. But then, once again, Korea, USS, and FTA, and I think if not address Korean demand 100%, but still has to consider. Otherwise, it might affect Korean public sentiments towards the United States. Again, I don't think this will be beneficial for US either. So I'm going to stop here with the notes, but I'm more happy to take any question, any critique, any arguments. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that very illuminating presentation. I have my question, but we already received several questions from Zoom, so I think I'll just reserve my question and just open to our audience. I'll take first question from our audience in this room, and then I'll move on to Zoom. Any questions? Yes, please identify yourself before you ask your question.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm a senior at GW. I was wondering if you expect the recent launch of the ballistic missile from North Korea to somehow impact Chinese-Korean relations at all, and whether it could possibly bring them together or push them farther apart from each other.
I mean the latest one or overall?
Overall, but especially the latest one.
Okay, so let me give my own views, and you may or may not agree with me. But during Trump, it's all about North Korea, as you know, right? And then under Biden administration, they're not really paying attention to North Korea, and North Korea wants some attention, from the United States, right? But that's why they keep shooting the missiles. And under Obama, they say it's a strategic patience, right? In terms of North Korean policy. And I've been saying that it's almost like right now, almost strategic neglect. But then I think finally it got attention from the United States because they were shooting missiles towards Japan, right? And then Japanese got very angry, and then finally Washington showed some attention. So I think now U.S. hands are really tied up with so many different things, and then they're sort of ignoring or downplaying those issues. And so they got some attention, but I don't know how much it will affect U.S. position or opinion, because the other one, we got a special rep on North Korea. Song Kim, he's very capable, seasoned diplomat with a lot of experience. But it's a part-time. He's still ambassador to Indonesia. He's in Jakarta. And Biden has been advocating human rights, but still he hasn't built up a special envoy on North Korean human rights position. Actually, South Korea just appointed. And we have a session tomorrow at CSIS, and you can join virtually. So we have Congressman Smith and so once again, I don't think frankly before Russia invasion of Ukraine, pretty much what Biden administration cared was about China. It's all about China. And then North Korea is trying to get attention, but still wasn't successful. So, last month, Kim Jong-un, publicly said that we never give up nuclear weapon. We knew that, but so, yeah, that's the situation right now. So I don't see any breakthrough anytime soon.
Thank you. So it's a big question. What do you think are the ways to induce China and Japan to be helpful for Korean unification?
I don't know. I don't think that will be their priority, either for Japanese or Chinese. Right? Frankly, you could argue that maybe China and Japan, they may are quite okay with the status quo, and I don't think they want any fundamental change. So I'm not sure whether they are necessarily against unification. At the same time, I don't think they will try to facilitate unification either. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Okay.
Michael Kim. I heard a saying, we like Korea so much that we like the fact there's two of them. But that's in terms of what you were just saying before. My question is more about the China's or the dispute between China and Koreans about history, particularly Goryeo. And I guess but more than that, it seems like Koreans are extremely sensitive about things in their history. And I was wondering if you could give us your views and analysis as a sociologist in terms of, like you said, Koreans are nationalistic. And so I guess I'm wondering your views on why that is and why they have this knee-jerk reaction in terms of Goryeo or let's say Dokdo Island and things like that. Thank you.
That's a really sensitive questions because I can angry Korean and Chinese at the same time. Japanese too. For example, Dokdo or Takeshima, I don't think it was important for either Korea or China, maybe until 19th century, for example. Right? It became more important after 1945. And in a sense, Goryeo, frankly, if you go back to that time, and I don't know how Goryeo would identify themselves, because now, in a sense, we have this nation state in a framework, right? And probably at the time, it's a different framework. So that's why, there's no question that for Koreans, it's a very important part of their history. But then probably China has certain grounds to argue that's part of their history as well. But then the main problem is that either Dokdo or Goryeo, they're all politicized. That's the main problem. So I don't know whether we can just leave to historians, but then it may be difficult, right? So that's why that has to do with their own national identity, right? So that for Koreans, history of Korea is an important part of their national history, their identity, and that's why they are very keen on that issue.
And should Washington policymakers be cognizant of that? How should they factor that into their foreign policy with Korea?
I don't think they care that much. Do you think
Should they?
Probably not. Right? I mean, what are you gonna do? So, I mean, okay. So I think regarding Dokdo, yeah, I think that's probably something the U.S. should pay attention to because, in my view, U.S. are somewhat responsible, but not so much about Korea history. Okay, for example, like when we are drafting San Francisco Peace Treaty, I mean, actually, what I know for a fact is that initially, I think it mentioned that to be part of Japan, I think, and then Korea protested it, and then it changed into part of Korea. Then Japan also protested, and in the end, we left out blank, right? And so I think regarding Dokdo or Takeshima, probably US should be concerned. But regarding Korea, I mean, what do you want to do? US didn't exist at the time. So it's hard, I mean, for US to take any position.
Thank you. Next question we have from Professor of History, Robert Hoppins, Professor of History, University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I was wondering why you think nationalism is less important for the younger generation. Do younger people care less about kimchi, hanbok, or koguryo? Is it nationalistic to be anti-American, but not nationalistic to be anti-China? If younger Koreans are critical of Chinese illiberalism, isn't that in part because of their democratic national identity?
Yeah, I think so. Probably, younger generations are less nationalistic in the sense that they are anti-something. Okay, I think for older generation, they are more concerned about big power, okay, and anti-something. But I think for younger generation, I think they are more confident. Okay, I mean, you could say that's also a positive part of nationalism as well. And then once again, they value liberalism, democratic values, and they cannot possibly embrace Chinese system. Okay, so I think that's my point.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is John. I'm from the Eurasia Center. My question is, what is your view about technology competition between China and the US, and what role does the South Korea play in that case? Thank you.
No, I think that's probably one of the most important or challenging issue for South Korea, because as I mentioned earlier, for a long time, citing the U.S. for security, but still, working closely with China on economic matters, and China has been, very beneficial to South Korean economy, right? And China has become number one trading partner for South Korea, for example. And now that's changing, right? Because now, especially U.S. is tying some technological sector into security issue, right? And they're now asking Korea to join, the Pacific economic framework and chief for and so on, right? So I think there are a few things. One is certainly South Korea is willing to join United States, especially the new government, and that's why I mentioned that a lot of Koreans were disappointed over this IRA. They excluded Korean electric car right now from getting benefits. But at the same time, Korea cannot completely ignore China either, right? I mean, still China is very important. So my sense is that probably those areas that have something to do with security, okay, like high tech, for example. And I think probably there are certain areas that will be decoupling, U.S. from China. Okay, just like a smartphone. We have iPhone and then Android, right? I'm using iPhone here. I'm using Samsung phone in Korea. It's okay, right? It's both of them. You don't have to use only iPhone, right? So just like that. So probably, if there's some decoupling there, probably Korea has to side with the United States and certain semiconductor or some high-tech area. But then there are many other areas like tourism, consumer goods, right? I mean, Korea can strengthen ties with China. Actually. So I don't think it's entirely zero-sum. And I think Korea needs to be more strategic and more flexible so that it can maximize their own interests. That's my view moving forward. But then this is a very different issue, not only for Korea, but Japan, Australia, many other countries in Asia.
Thank you. Next question we have from Dr. Sandra Park. She's a postdoctoral fellow at Gi-Wook. She couldn't help but wonder what impact this height of anti-China sentiments has on migrant communities. Could you please speak a bit on how this political mood may have impacted Korean Chinese or Chinese migrant groups living in South Korea? I actually have a related question. So as I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking, okay, what if here in the US, we had an Olympic and in the opening ceremony, ethnic Koreans wore hanbok and was, walking in the parade. What kind of response Koreans would have to that? Maybe I feel it may even be positive, right? Oh, Koreans are here. We see, they're one of the ethnic minorities. But in China, when they did that in China, so I think there's this different views or this anxiety or ambivalent views towards Chinese government's control of ethnic minorities and also Korean Chinese living there. So yeah, I mean, what's your view about that as well? So I think that they're related.
Right. So I think the first part, yeah, sure, certainly it affects ethnic Korean Chinese living in Korea, Joseonjo, right, or Chinese migrants. But then the second one, that's something I really want as a conversation because I raised a question in my class because what if I think someone made the same point, exactly the same as what you said, like what if Korean Americans wearing hanbok in let's say LA Olympics? It's very positive, right? So after that, I got some email from Joseonjo, Korean Chinese scholar in China, and they are very unhappy about this Korean claim to hanbok because they claim that sure, we are so Korean descendants. That's our tradition too. Why only those in South Korea can claim the right to hanbok? We are Korean heritage as well. And then it's the same thing. What if then? So ethnic Korea is one of 55 minorities in China, and there's not only Korean, right? Other ethnic minorities wearing their own traditional costume. So what if then they, deleted or they didn't have ethnic Korean in the Olympic ceremony? Then maybe Koreans may be angry too, right? Why you didn't include us, right? So I mean that's why because of overall political atmosphere that kind of amplify. I mean that's why I mentioned that there's an episode that may be legitimate and some of them can be misleading. And I think hanbok is such a case because once again, a lot of Korean Chinese scholar in China, they are very happy that Koreans in South Korea claim that that's their own tradition, then they're saying we are Korean too. We happen to be in Chinese territory. So I mean that's why it's a very interesting topic for discussion in class because also and I ask Chinese students. I mean do you hear about this controversy? And they say not much. So certainly it's a big issue in Korea, but not so much big issue in China. So I think in a sense they may reflect asymmetry of power. So I wrote a book on one alliance and two lands, also article. Then I think asymmetry of power and attention. The same thing, when it comes to U.S. Korea relations. U.S. has much bigger power, but then Koreans give much more attention. Okay, and same thing, or same issue. There's a big, looks like a big issue for Korea, but not so much for Chinese. So I think that's a kind of fascinating story. Hanbok, what if, as you mentioned, they didn't show that in the ceremony, and Koreans certainly are happy to.
I think it's also accumulation of what's been happening between China and Korea. So for example, starting with Northeast Asia project, I think that's the moment when there was this emergence of anti-Chinese sentiment in Korea with that historical dispute, and then kimchi, and then hanbok. And so I think when hanbok, they saw hanbok in Beijing Olympics, I think for me, I mean, Koreans' perception of Korean Chinese in Korea versus how they perceive other Korean diaspora. Sometimes, I mean, in some sense, there's gap there, right? And that's one of the reasons why they got so angry when in that Olympic Korean minorities showed up in hanbok. So I think that again it goes back to the question of the recognition of Korean Chinese as Korean diaspora community. How can we understand the gap there, right?
And also, I think Koreans hear about Chinese suppression of other ethnic minorities in China, so they might amplify. I think really this economic retaliation that was really turning point. That was a wake-up call for Koreans because like a history issue, hanbok, you can dispute, but then it doesn't really affect your life, right? But then economic retaliation, that was real actually. And then to be fair, it was a little too much on the side of China because U.S. Korea have an alliance. And then if U.S. wanted to deploy that in Korea, they have to allow it to happen, right? But then China already retaliated in South Carolina over them. And that was really very tough. And then Koreans finally, it's not like before. But then that really created really negative atmosphere against China in Korea. So I think that's why those in the episode adding up, so that if you only one email is not a big deal, but then even the larger context adding up, one by one, really amplified to explore.
I think in that situation, when it comes to that issue, I think there's also the rise of anti-American sentiment at the time because the U.S. didn't really kind of intervene to say or to support Korea, and that kind of disappointed Koreans when actually this was happening because of U.S. demand. And so I think there's also both anti-Chinese and anti-American sentiment going up at the same time. But anyways, all right. Any questions from the audience? Ines, please.
I had a question about the continuation of anti-China and anti-Japan sentiment. I thought the graphs that you had were very interesting. I was curious if you think that the anti-China sentiment is going to continue to worsen, especially with President Yoon's current policy towards China, and as like the younger generation continues to be more anti-China, if anti-Japan sentiments will like level out or even lessen. Though I know like the Japanese colonialism, land claims, and comfort women are still like very present in the Korean minds. I was wondering how like China's growing power and influence would affect these sentiments and the difference.
I mean, we'll have to see, but then I don't see how this anti-China sentiment will weaken or disappear anytime soon. I think it will continue, at least for a while. There has to be a certain also a moment or turning point toward the other way, right? And I cannot think of the moment anytime soon, especially given the ongoing tension between US and China, right? And then also the conservative back to power. At least like for the next 4 or 5 years, I don't see any big change in public sentiment towards China. And regarding Japan, I think some Koreans now feel that they should improve bilateral relationship between Japan and South Korea. And it got really bad, I mean, last few years. And then, I'm the one who believe and argue that, South Korea and Japan share the most strategic interest, and they are allied to the United States. They are liberal democracy, advanced country. They even share aging population and demographic problems. They are facing big China in their neighbor. So I think Korea, Japan should improve their relationship, and I think there seems to be certain momentum a few months ago. And now both Kishida and Yoon Suk-Yeol really struggling with their popularity, right? Both of them like in mid-late 20%, right? So there's no political support to improve. So that's really unfortunate. So certainly, just like here, domestic politics is very important factor affecting presentation.
Thank you. Another question from Zoom from Ed Dong. Does this Korean use the term 사대주의 anymore? If so, to which country?
Yeah, I don't think I hear that much often this 사대주의. Probably you can tell me, but now I'm feeling I feel generational gap. When I'm talking to younger generation, I think they are very different than myself. So I feel like it's time for me to go. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, you may not realize, but I hear much less. And I've been telling Korean friends, I mean, it's a little half joke, but it's true that look, China, US, they all wanted to maintain or build empire. I mean, they are imperialists fundamentally, right? Don't be mistaken. But still, would you like to work with Chinese imperialists or American imperialists? Probably American is better, better than Chinese. So certainly, they're a big power, and IRA is a good indication that after all, US, for them, their own interest is top priority, right? So Korean should be misled by that fact. So, but nonetheless, if you have to choose, American versus Chinese, who are gonna pick? Still, I say American. It's not because I live here. To we maintain a smaller empire head or even so union.
Those of you who don't know 사대주의, the Korean word 사대주의, it means serving the great, and it was that was what defined its relationship with China before 20th century. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
I provoked a lot of. You're thinking.
Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. My name is Sinan Qasim. I'm a first-year student undergraduate at the Elliott School with an interest particularly in economic development. So my question is actually, I'm curious on your perspective on the One Belt, One Road initiative and how it's altered or influenced or perception of China across the region and even around the world.
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, and certainly that's the main way of building sort of Chinese, you can even say empire or atmosphere. And oftentimes I compare China today with Soviet Union during Cold War. I mean, Soviet Union built their own system basically. And China is not really building that, but still trying to create its own sphere through Belt and Road. I don't think it's going that way. Certainly, smaller countries in Asia like Laos, Cambodia, still they appreciate Chinese support in some African countries. But as I show, in many advanced countries in Asia or Europe, North America, they are very anti-China. So that's why I'm saying that they need to do better public diplomacy. Okay, and then certainly providing economic benefit is important. That's not all. And if you look at the United States, we create a lot of international institutions, World Bank. We have Fulbright and Fiscal, and so certainly, we build and we maintain empire in multiple ways. It's not only military power, political power, and I think China is still far away. So I think overall, I don't think Belt and Road is going as well as China expected. We'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your lecture. So my name is Yifan Guo. I'm a just recent graduate from GW. So my question is about the immigration policy. Like I wrote a paper about do Nationality Act of 2010 in the South Korea, and I quote a lot about your book, 2016 books about ethnic nationalism in Korea. So I'm wondering, like as a South Korea facing the aging society right now, so how does its government pursue the multiculturalism society? You still like the South Koreans still have a large of influence of Chinese immigrants in countries. As a the Do Nationality Act regulates it, incorporate a lot of co-ethnic group from China. So I just want to know, like, how would you, predict or expect like South Korean tackle this issue rather than incorporate a lot of co-ethnic groups from China, because you said there's a decreasing a lot of negative view towards China in this case, and also it's possible we see a lot of geo conflicts right now, and the ongoing the debate about China, Japan, and Korean FTA is like it never happened. These kind of things. So I just want to know what's your view about this kind of trilateral trade agreement, if that's possible, like achieve in the future.
The second one, my short answer is probably not likely anytime soon. But the first one, you raised also a very important issue because Korea has been promoting multiculturalism, but it's basically accommodating unskilled labor, but also mainly marriage, migrants, like from Vietnam and China and so on. But then the name is multiculturalism, but then actual policy is largely assimilation. Right? And then teaching how to make kimchi, right? And how to respect your senior parents and so on. Not really appreciating their own culture. So therefore, if you say in Korea, you're from multicultural family, it has negative connotation, right? So now I think Korea has to think about migration very seriously, not only importing unskilled labor and migrant manage migrants, but also skilled labor. I mean, that's part of my plus I'm now looking at Japan, Australia, India, and China. And Japan is facing a similar problem. So you will have to now import skilled labor from a foreign country. But then, to be honest, Korea or Japan, it's not a good place for foreigners. I mean, maybe Australia, Canada, maybe better than Korea or Japan, right? And so that's why I've been saying that Korea really has to appreciate and promote cultural diversity. And still about 96% of Korean population are ethnic Korean. Still very homogeneous, right? And then sure, of course, Korea should be very proud. And I mean, think about Korea became now almost like top 10 country in the world in overall national power, economic, military, cultural power. But still, Koreans are not really embracing cultural diversity. And whenever I have a chance to talk to young people in Korea, I say that how you can be a global citizen, right? It's not English, because Koreans spend so much time and energy and money to master English. I mean, the young people have great English, much better than mine, actually. And so I've been asking them, what is the most widely used language in the world? Do you know? Which one? Spanish? Chinese? It's a broken English, right? You and I have broken English, right? So I say, it's okay to have an accent. Okay? You don't have to be perfect. I think even in this country, I guess only maybe like 2/3 of Americans have native English, right? A lot of migrants. But what I'm saying is that you better to learn, multicultural skills, so that you understand, appreciate other culture, other people, so that you can work together. So, for example, like in Silicon Valley, a lot of migrants, Indian, Chinese. So there's some Asians when they come to Silicon Valley, they're surprised. We are white Caucasians. It's all Asian, right? That is Silicon Valley, right? So, Koreans come to Silicon Valley, they have great education, perfect English, but still struggling because they don't know how to get along with different ethnic groups. So I think that's why I think Korea, Japan, I think also China, they all should promote, so that they can embrace global talent. Otherwise, Korea wouldn't be able to attract skilled labor. They will be losing to Australia, Singapore, maybe Canada, and so on. So I think that's also a main challenge facing Korea was Japan. I think Japan is trying very hard, getting better, but still quite behind.
My name is Chong Jane Kim. I'm with Congressman Smith's office, work as a foreign policy there. I was just wondering, Professor Shin, we talk a lot about young group in Korea leading that anti-Chinese sentiment. What about the young group within China? I wouldn't really call it an anti-Chinese sentiment, but perhaps anti-Xi or anti-CCP sentiment. Do you think potentially they could play some kind of role in that? I mean, I bring this up because I recently read, and some of us pretty much are aware of their draconian COVID policy. And young, 20, 30 something, affluent, well-educated Chinese folks are actually learning how to flout those draconian measures, for instance, holding private parties and using different apps to dodge those measures. So do you see potentially this particular group, well-educated, perhaps even abroad, play some kind of role instigating, fostering some kind of anti-CCP sentiment?
Probably not, at least in the short term. I know there's some successful businessmen and Chinese businessmen, they're really unhappy with Xi Jinping regime because they believe that Xi Jinping and his regime is really going to undermine Chinese economy. I think when it comes to young people with intellectuals, for example, like before pandemic and during Trump era, I went to China and had a conversation with some Chinese professors. They are quite ambivalent because on the one hand, they know some problems with Chinese system. At the same time, they are very unhappy that U.S. was pushing China unfairly. Okay, so that's why they are very ambivalent. And politically, that's going to help Xi Jinping by promoting more nationalism and strengthen his power. And I don't think younger people, if you don't really like Xi Jinping, then they come to United States. Why they go back to China, right? But they are more minority. And I think nationalism in China is real. Like they are really growing up. They think they can compete with the United States. And sure, they have their own problem. I think what I heard was that there's a lot of propaganda in China. About America handling of pandemic, racial tensions here, inflation. So there are more than enough bad stories about the United States to promote within China. So I think younger people are also influenced by those stories. So I think some of them are asking, is it safe to go to the United States to study? Right now, there's so much anti-China sentiment. So it's not like, for us living in this country, how they, support Xi Jinping system. I think many Chinese younger people inside China, they hear a lot of bad stories about U.S., Europe, and other parts of the world. And then they believe after all, we are not too bad actually. So that's why I don't think, at least in the short term, it will provoke any anti-CSP sentiment.
I'm a journalist from Hong Kong, and there are a few data that I would like to ask about. First one is you say because the youngsters or the Korean people say that China's lack of respect to Korea. I'm just wondering how to quantify the respect. Is it something very sentimental, or it's because of economically or geopolitically? And the second question is that I find it very interesting. One data is that you have a few age ranges, study about how many people support the U.S. affiliation, and then of course the 20, 30 years old young people, they support U.S. but people, the group that aged 60 or above, the data rise to 80% again. And because the 40, 50 drops, right? And 60s, and then goes up again. Well, what's happening with that age group? Is it because of Korean War or some other factors? And my last question would be the future impact of these negative, anti-China sentiment. Do you see it's only some feelings or sentiments, or are you foreseeing that to be materialized, or have some really practical impact on Korean-China relationship? Between them. Thank you.
So in terms of lack of respect, for example, I think when Moon Jae-in went to China to meet with Xi Jinping some years ago, there was a report that he ended up having meals by himself, right? So that Chinese were not treating him properly. That's one example that Koreans saying China doesn't show respect for Korea, for example. But once again, there's an accumulation of episodes, and some of them are legitimate, some of them are open to dispute. as you mentioned about history of Korea, certainly it's an important part of history for Korea. I'm sure Chinese believe that's part of their own history, and then it's very hard to reconcile, for example. Right? So, in a sense, maybe if Koreans protest, I mean, they have right to protest, but at the same time, I don't think Koreans can expect China to say sorry, it's your history. It's over. It's not going to happen that way. So I mean, that will continue, and then probably Korea may feel that China doesn't respect Korean history, right? So once again, that's more like sentiment or judgment, and not much you can do, for example, right? So I think the government is trying to downplay those issues so that it doesn't become too political issue for either side. And regarding age difference, as I mentioned, probably those in 50s and 60s or 40s, 50s, I mean, they are more sympathetic to China than younger or really older people. As I mentioned, they grew up in very anti-American culture in their college years, for example. So that might explain. And in terms of future, once again, I think China needs to do better public diplomacy towards Koreans. Probably, I think some Chinese told me that maybe China did too much when they retaliated in Korea over without deployments, because I think they wanted to teach a lesson to Korean by, with harsh measures, but it kind of backfired. And then there's turning point in terms of Korean public sentiments towards China. So I think there are certain things that China can do. But once again, it's just like one episode. Always trend is very important. Trend has been continuously downfall, and then accumulation of smaller ones, right? I mean, in boxing, you can one big punch, or you can accumulate small punches over round, right? I don't know which is more serious damage, right? So I think it will take time to recover if it happens. I mean, eventually, or when both China and Korea recognize that they can't continue, like this, then there may be efforts to improve. Until then, I think it will continue to get worse and worse. So, I don't see, as I mentioned earlier, anytime soon that Koreans again embrace China with a positive attitude. So it's a tough time, I think, for Korea and also probably China too. But I don't think it is. I don't think China is taking that seriously, because for China, Korea is still maybe a small country, right? But then I think Korea is taking more seriously about this issue.
Thank you. Next question from Zoom.
Okay, more questions, okay?
I think we have maybe one or two more questions. Professor Robert Hoppins asked another question. Any effect on Korean views of Japan since the assassination of Japanese Prime Minister Abe and press coverage of the Unification Church in Japan?
Not much, yeah. I think Japan-Korea relations really hit the bottom. I don't think it can really go any worse than that, actually. So, my view, both sides are trying to improve. I think they recognize the need or even urgency to do that. But then, once again, both Kishida and Yoon, they are struggling with low ratings, and then they will have to political will to do that. So still, for Koreans, Japan is quite a touchy issue, because as you know, still there's a court decision, right, for Japanese company to pay what they owed during colonial periods. That's sticking point, and the Japanese is telling Korea saying, you gotta figure that out first, right? Then it's very hard issue. So I think for Korean government, they are trying to find the solution to reconcile between security interests and public opinion. And it's always a tough issue when it comes to Japan. But now China is also becoming very complicated. So that's my point, that now not only Japan but also China's big issue for Korea to address public sentiment.
All right, I think we're just about done. So thank you so much for attending all these questions and for your very interesting and illuminating presentation. Please join me in thanking Professor Shin.
It's great to see a lot of your students. Yeah, it's really good to see in person. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to our audience and also those of you who joined us via Zoom. We'll have another events, numerous events throughout the semester. So please join us again. Thank you.